Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another week of the Bible Boys. My name is James.
And I'm Pip, and I'm thrilled again. Another week. Okay, another week of getting into the Bible, thinking about God, and doing it with y'all. So that's awesome. Now, last week, we had a mystery question that James alluded to that has been left unresolved. And so I reckon we should dive to that first. James, what's this mystery question that you've got on the boiler?
Well, now that we've had a week of anticipation, I'm sorry to disappoint any of our listeners and you, Pip, who may have been waiting in anticipation. But the question I wanted to talk about is this: which comic book superhero is most like Jesus? Now, I've worded that very specifically because we couldn't go the other way. Which comic book superhero is Jesus most like? Because Jesus is holy, right? He is like no other. But there might be a superhero somewhere here or there who has something like Jesus, even if it's like 0.001%.
I like this question, and I'm gonna throw an option out there. Okay,
Yes.
which is that he's like the Green Lantern.
Okay. Green Lantern, DC comic hero. Yes.
In that no one really. He's misunderstood,
Go on.
but he is the light of the world.
Hey. That's
And
pretty good.
Is he green? Now that's where the analogy falls down.
Yeah, I don't know if he was green. But interesting. Oh, here we go. Let me add to it, right? So for the Green Lantern, they have this ring, and the ring can form constructs. But what limits the construct, what makes it reality, is their ability to envision something, right? So if they can envision something like, a big boxing glove punching their enemy, there'll be a big boxing glove that punches their enemy. Now, Jesus, the incarnate Son of God, created all things. He was the one who envisions all things and makes them reality. Just like the Green Lantern is like Jesus. Jesus is not like the Green Lantern.
I think I followed along with that line of logic, and it checks out. So I'm on board. So what's your answer, James? You've had time to think about this.
Yes. Well, you see, I've gone through a whole cycle of answers because my favorite comic book... Do you have a favorite comic book superhero, Pip?
Not a big comic book guy. I like Batman, though.
That's true. We have talked about this before. That
Yes.
anyone could be Batman, right? Like he's just rich, and he's using his riches.
That's what I like about him. Is that
Yes.
like it's an attainable goal.
That's right. So I was going, well, you know what? My favorite superhero is Spider-Man, heart of gold, a good person, just reconciling the trickiness of everyday life with the call to be a hero. Not that Jesus was reconciling the trickiness of everyday life, but he came among us and he experienced all the weaknesses that we do. Spider-Man experiences all the weaknesses that we have. But then Viv and I were watching Spectacular Spider-Man, like really, really good incarnation of Spider-Man animated series. And it just occurred to us that, Peter Parker, he's he has trouble deciding which lady he's going to have a romantic relationship with. And that's just not on. That's not on. So I don't think I can go with Spider-Man Peter Parker anymore, even though he's still my favorite superhero. And so the next answer is Superman, right? So Superman had to leave his home country because there was an attack that threatened his life, went to a foreign land. And then when he grew and then went back to his, Jesus, Herod, killing all the 2-year-olds and unders. And so he went to Egypt, and then he came back. And then, he's a force for good. Superman is sort of like a god among men. Jesus is God with us. So I'm inclined to say Superman, but that seems like too serious of an answer.
Cop-out.
Yeah, a bit of a cop-out. That's right.
Superman, of course. All right. He's super. You know.
That's it.
So is that your answer? Is that your final answer?
I am inclined to say Superman, but I wanted to ask you because I thought that you might give a funnier answer.
I think the Green Lantern. I also think maybe the Flash.
Oh, go on.
Well, Jesus was very quick.
In what sense?
Probably at running, you know. Probably run around, you know.
You know, it is very interesting. I once remember listening to a lecture by this theologian who was saying, you know, sin doesn't just affect our character, but sin also affects our thinking, our ability to think right. Sin affects our bodies such that we can, you know, get sick and decay in that way. Imagine what it would be like. You know, Jesus lived in a sinful world, but he was a sinless man. Just imagine what physical possibilities might have been unlocked for him. So maybe he was the fastest runner who ever lived. You know, Usain Bolt ain't got anything on Christ Jesus of Nazareth.
There's a PhD there for someone who wants to pick that up and run with it.
Literally. There you go. Anyway, thank you for indulging me with this question.
No, that's I'm happy with that. That's a good question. Now I have a question for you, James.
Yes, sir.
All right. I just had a doctrine class.
Oh, yes.
Okay, with Mark Thompson, principal of Moore College. Absolutely fascinating. Fantastic class. Very interesting.
What was the topic?
We're talking about the doctrine of God, the nature of God, and it's thinking specifically about in reference to creation. So his creation, like, why does God create? Why did God create? Why, you know, what were the factors? Why didn't he have to create? And I guess, like, one question that we're talking about is God is all-knowing. And, you know, I posted that thing on Instagram about, like, how humans, as people, we have known knowns, things that we know. We have known unknowns. We have areas of mystery that we know, we're aware that we don't know much about them. Then we have unknown unknowns. There are things that are mysteries. We haven't even conceived of them. But for God, it's only known knowns. And I guess the question that has been boggling my mind all morning, not that I think about this a lot, but it's been boggling my mind all morning, is how does God know he knows everything? Do you know what I mean?
How does God know that he knows everything?
Yeah. So let's, knows everything. There isn't a in his thinking, there's no possibility that there is anything outside of his sphere of knowledge. There's nothing that he doesn't know. Do you know? Does that make sense as a question?
It does. It does.
So how can someone know that they know everything?
Let me make it even more thorny.
Okay.
Sin. God cannot sin. So does he know the experience? Isn't it true that he doesn't know the experience of sin? And the guilt of sin?
Yes. And there are verses that says, you know, God cannot lie.
Yes.
You know. And so, yes, he hasn't experienced those things, but does he know, like, can he posit what they're like?
Yeah.
What is it like to lie?
Yes.
What is it like to sin? Anyway, that's an open-ended question that's
a big one.
Yeah, I don't think there's an answer to it, to be honest. I think it's one of the known unknowns. We know about it, we don't know the answer.
So there's unknown unknowns, there's known unknowns, there's known knowns, unknown unknowns, but this is a known unknown.
This is a known unknown. I don't think we have any unknown knowns.
Right.
That's one category that we don't have, because
Sure.
if we know something...
Well, maybe you do in your own subjective experience, because other people know it, but you don't.
Maybe. Yes. Okay, yes. All right.
Here's something to think about, right? That there's a sense in which you might say and I'm drawing from a philosopher named Anselm at this point, where it's a form of argument that he had for God, which is imagine a being who could not possibly know. Sorry, let me say that again. Imagine a being who could not possibly not know all that there is to know.
Imagine a being that could not possibly know everything that there is to know. Is that it? That's us,
Sorry,
right?
I think I said it wrong. Imagine a being who could not possibly not know everything that there is to know.
Right, yes, and that's what I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway. No, I'm not going to go down the Anselm line. Never mind. But that it would be contradictory to God's character to not know all that exists and is created, because he is the creator and is in sovereign control of all that is. So it's not really an answer to your question, but saying that it would be almost self-refuting to who God is.
Yes.
Interesting.
Anyway, let's go back to revealed knowledge, the Bible.
Let's do the Bible, because, Pip, what are we?
We're the Bible boys.
That's right.
And we would be remiss if we did not at least spend a little bit of time in the Bible. So
a bit, half of our time, a bit more than half of our time. Let's do it.
James, what have you been reading in the Bible lately?
I have been continuing on in my Bible reading of Minor Prophets, but I'm still preaching in Titus. So last week I shared from Titus chapter 2. This week I want to share 2 things from Titus, one from chapter 2 and one from chapter 3. So if you can open up to Titus chapter 2, that would be great.
Yep.
We need music that plays when we're flipping.
We need the Kahoot music.
Hey, by the way, I found on Spotify that Jonathan Wolff, who was the composer of Seinfeld, recently released the original television soundtrack. And I listened to it this morning while making breakfast.
You just feel funnier and like life is more comedic when that music's going on in the background.
Yeah, it's just so great. And you know what? Maybe at some point during the podcast, I will play one of the tunes and ask if you can guess which episode or like what was happening.
Or a scene.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Anyway, here we are in Titus chapter 2. I want to point out 2 things. So last week I was pointing out how the grace of God teaches us to say no to ungodliness and to say yes to living self-controlled, upright, and godly lives. Chapter 2, here's the first thing I want to point out. What is common behind his exhortations to old men and old women and young women and then young men seems to be self-control. So I was looking at his commands to them and saying, what's common between them? So you got verse 2, teach the elder men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled. You've got, so that's the older men. Younger men, verse 6, similarly encourage the young men to be self-controlled. Then you've got the older women and the younger women. And so in the older women, verse 4, are told to do this. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, verse 5, to be self-controlled, and so on. And so that just really struck me that when I think about, shall we say, virtues, shall we think, what it means to do good, what it means to be one of God's people who are putting sin to death and living for him, I would think love, faith, grace. But in Titus chapter 2, the common feature between the older men, younger men, older women, younger women, at least in the sense that the older women are to teach the younger women self-control, is self-control. How often do you and I think of self-control as a core component of growing in godly character? Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah, I just wanted to hear what you thought about that first.
Yeah. I guess like it's a it's a foundational virtue where it's like if you can't even control yourself, it doesn't really matter. Like if you want to do something good, if you can't even control yourself to do it, then it's not going to happen, you know? Yeah. Do you think it's synonymous with like discipline? Be self-disciplined, be self-controlled, be able to manage yourself so that you're actually able to love others and to be upright and to be of sound doctrine and to be of sound lifestyle and all those sorts of things, you know? I guess it's also like you can't really isolate particular attributes of the, you know, maybe you can, but there are some that necessarily like overlap. Like if I want to work on loving someone by doing their grocery shopping or doing something for them on a routine basis, that's going to require sacrifice, that's going to require generosity, that's going to require self-control, discipline, that's going to require love. And so, yeah, there's a mixture of attributes there, but self-control, you do need self-control. Yeah, those are some thoughts.
That they're interconnected and related with the other things as well.
Yeah. I mean, what would it look like for someone to not be self-controlled, but to be upright and to be loving and to be patient and gentle and forgiving and all those sorts of things?
It's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. That there's a sense in which there would be something lacking, big time, and almost off-putting about describing someone as loving but not self-controlled. But then, you know what? Now that I say that, I can even imagine it though. Like, you can imagine someone who's very sacrificial, very kind, very gentle, but then when it comes to, let's say, alcohol, for example, you know, the way they treat others is very kind, gentle, gracious, patient, but they lack self-control when it comes to alcohol. So you can imagine that situation, can't you? So maybe there are other ways you could see it. Though, that being said, then that would manifest in ways that could affect others that would not be loving to them or not kind to them. So, yeah, there could be a connection there.
Yeah.
The thing that interested me about this is to then remember in the section that I preached last week for our youth, Titus 2, verses 11 to 14, self-control is one of the key aspects that Paul raises in verse 12. So talking about the grace of God, he says, verse 12, it teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. So, at the very least, Paul is consistent, isn't he? You know, the common thing between the older, younger men and women is self-control. And he says, verse 12, God's grace does teach us to live self-controlled lives. And so I think part of that as well, which I think you hinted at already, is this idea of not being a slave to your passions. Not just doing something because you feel like doing it. Or anything just because you feel like doing it. Yeah, but actually taking control. In one sense, discipline, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, so that's one thought that I had that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
Here's a second one. Chapter 3. Just because, so next week, either I might be preaching this next week or the week after. It's just really fascinating. Chapter 3, verse 1, remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good. Now, we've seen variations of this sort of command in, 1 Peter chapter 2, Romans chapter 13. But I think it's just struck me again because chapter 3, verse 1 comes right after chapter 2, verse 15. Chapter 2, verse 15 says, "Encourage and rebuke with all authority. Do not let anyone despise you. Remind the people to be subject." And chapter 3, verse 1 now. Remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities.
Mm.
And it just got me thinking because there's a lot of, say, Christian commentators who have a very high suspicion of authorities. And, you know, whenever the government is trying to tell us to do something, especially right now with coronavirus restrictions and whatnot, resist what the government is saying, this, that, and whatever. And yet Titus is saying, encourage and rebuke with all authority, remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient. And so I don't really have a concluding thought here at this point. I just thought it was fascinating and I wanted to raise it and to ask what you had to think about or had to say about this.
Yeah, look, I mean, reading some of those attributes in chapter 2, and then you get a particular vibe of what kind of person Paul wants Christians to be, in a sense. Like, encourage young men to be self-controlled. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, soundness of speech. So anyone who opposes you would be ashamed because they've got nothing bad to say about us. We wait for the blessed hope. We're eager to do what is good. There's a certain, I think the word, maybe the word I'm looking for is meekness. There's a certain meekness and a willingness to submit ourselves to others, whether it's a teacher or a spiritual authority or God or a government authority. There should be a willingness to submit, which I think is not necessarily seen as a virtue in our current culture, although that's obviously a very generic thing to say. There are pockets of people who would see it as a vice to be inclined to submit to authorities, and it's seen as a virtue by a lot of people to have this instinct of, there's an authority, let me see how I can be disobedient to them and show how my moral code or my intelligence is superior to theirs, and so subvert them. I think that's that's an unchristian way to kind of go about life. Now obviously there are examples of legitimate problems that we might have with authorities, but as that should, our inclination should not be to not submit. Our inclination should be to submit to authorities. Yeah. Yeah. Those are some thoughts. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think I'm just really reminded and struck by the fact that Paul and Peter were talking about, submitting and being obedient to authorities in the midst of persecution, in the midst of hardship. I read and listen quite widely across the political spectrum. When I listen to some supposedly Christian voices talking about relationship to government, I'm going, I can't imagine that Paul or Peter would be impressed with this. Saying that masks and vaccines are oppressive. Meanwhile, Paul and Peter were seeing brothers and sisters dragged into prison, ripped apart in the Colosseum. And yet they still say, submit to the authorities. Now, submitting to the authorities didn't mean letting go of your faith. But I guess on one level, what it did mean is being willing to suffer the consequences of what, it's not as if the Christians were called to fight back against those who were taking them to prison. So there's just a disconnect in my mind when I listen to or read these commentators or these people writing articles or Facebook posts and just going, you sound more worldly conservative than Christian biblical. And there is a difference. Yeah.
I think just one thing on that though, with the whole mask and vaccine, the opposition to masks and vaccine that you see from, I don't know what the right, I don't want to label, but, a radical right in which like evangelical Christians are often, equated with or caught up with. There is a difference though in terms of our climate and what, you talk about the violent persecutions in the early church. Like, I don't think anyone's necessarily taking up sword. Do you know what I mean? Like, even in Sydney, no one's putting forward the idea of violent disobedience. Like, even the protesters, wanted the majority wanted a non-violent protest. So I'm cautious to kind of draw the connection between early church kind of obedience and contrasting that with people voicing frustrations and anger with the government now as like disobedience. Is that the kind of disobedience that Paul had in mind? Yeah, I don't know.
That's a helpful comment and corrective there, yeah, because within our government system, we do have provisions for protesting. We do have provisions for being able to let your voice in opposition to things be heard. That's true. No, that's a helpful thing to point out there. I guess going back to what you said before, it's more the attitude that you come with, right? Do you come with one that is seeking to be obedient and submissive to the governments, to the rulers, or you coming ready to point out that you're not happy with what's being done?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what submission looks like, right? Like, if you think about the way in which we submit to Christ, and I know it's different because the way we submit to Christ is different to the way we should submit to governments and rulers and whatnot. But it's more than just obeying what Jesus says. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just, Jesus tells me I should put sin to death and seek to grow in gentleness. It's more than just going, all right, I hate this. I think this is the stupidest command that Jesus has ever come up with, but I got to do it anyway. Okay. Like, that might be obedience, but that's not the right attitude that we should have with Jesus.
Yes. Yep. I agree with that. But what about this? Do you think it's ever okay? Do you let's say that someone is a Christian and wants to submit to Jesus, wants to submit to the Bible, doesn't believe the science on masks, thinks it's silly that people have to wear masks outside. So they think it doesn't make sense. Should that person just do it anyway because the government said to do it? I think yes. I think there are situations where you disagree with an authority, you think what they say is silly, but you do it anyway. Because it's better to forego what you think makes sense and to do what's actually been commanded, because that's more in line with humility, with love for other people, even if it's just loving people who have a different idea of what is the go with the science, Yeah.
No, I agree with that. In lieu of seeing something as good and beautiful, you should go with it because it's true, or it's true of what you've been commanded to do. But I think that you don't want to stay there. Like, when it comes to, so just going back to commands that Jesus gives us, it's not enough to just do what he says because he says it, because that will only get you so far, and it's a very poor motivator. But to know that it is a good and beautiful thing that pleases God, that is more compelling. And it's also more important in the way you talk about it and seek to teach others. I remember one time I threw the line out that, I'm called to teach what the Bible teaches, even if I don't like it. And someone called me out on that. A minister called me out on that and said, well, I understand what you're trying to say, James, but actually you should seek to grow to like it as well.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe then, going to what you were saying with mosques, I think yes, but just as a general attitude when it comes to governments and rulers, it's not just to do what they say begrudgingly, but to try to understand and see the goodness of aligning yourself with what the government is saying.
But I think that there is a distinction to make between human authorities and Jesus. Like,
that's true.
It's like if Jesus is God, he will never lie. He'll never be wrong. So his commands will be good and will be lovable, and we should try to love and grow in understanding them. There will, though, be sometimes when human authorities will give a command that actually will be wrong.
Yes, agreed.
But that doesn't mean that you don't follow it. There are certain situations where you shouldn't follow it, where those commands contradict with the commands of God. But our I guess that's a question that you ask, but your default should be obedience to that command, even if you don't really agree with that command.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Hey, this has been really good. Just trying to tease out the nuances of how you apply a passage like this. So
yeah,
it's been good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pip. So there you go. That's me. How about you?
Cool.
What have you been reading in the Bible?
So still working my way through Exodus. Mm-hmm. My plan was to read the whole Bible this year. I'm not sure I think I'll need to speed up if I want to do that. But I don't want to speed up. I kind of every day I read and I start reading through a chapter and I'm writing down questions as I go. And I feel I don't want to rush. I want to take it slow. But what I want to share is something from Exodus 22 and 23. So if you go to Exodus 22, Exodus 22 verse 21, this is God giving Moses commands about social responsibility. And in verse 21 he says, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner. And then he follows it up with this, for you were foreigners in Egypt. So God's saying, because you were foreigners in Egypt, you should know not to mistreat or oppress a foreigner. You know what it's like to be a foreigner. So don't mistreat or oppress a foreigner that comes into your midst. You see that again in chapter 23. So if you go to chapter 23 verse 9, it says, do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners because you were foreigners in Egypt. And so, as God is giving all these commands, it's interesting that when he comes to that command, do not oppress, don't take advantage of, don't rip off or bully a foreigner, he appeals to the fact that they know what it's like to be a foreigner in Egypt. And they were bullied. They were forced to be slaves in Egypt. And so part of their kind of social conscience, the Israelites, was their understanding of where they'd come from, how God had rescued them, and what God has done for them, but also staying aware of what it was like to be, a slave or a foreigner in Egypt.
Hmm.
And I guess that just reminded me, like, it reminded me of, I think there's there's a connection to be made with how we as Christians have our sense of, we want to love other people, we want to treat other people fairly, but we also want to show grace, which is kind of unfair, but we want to show grace to people and mercy to people, because God showed grace and mercy to us. And we know what it's like to be stuck in sin. We know what it's like to be sinned against and to sin. But yeah, these passages remind me of 1 John chapter 4, 7 to 11, which was a memory verse we did on youth camp a while back.
To Lewis Capaldi's
That's it.
Somebody to Love.
That's it. I won't sing it, but let me just read this out. 1 John 4, 7 to 11 says, Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. And so there's this connection that's being made between, look at what's your identity? What has happened to you? What has God done for you? Well, that's to be the kind of the blueprint of how you to treat other people in life. God has shown you mercy. He sent his one and only Son to die for you. You ought to love others, lay down your life for your brothers and sisters, and be willing to do that. That's the blueprint. And yeah, so as Christians, we do have this blueprint of how to love, which is radically self-sacrificial, based on and remembering the love that God has shown us in Jesus. Yeah, love is not an abstract thing.
No.
It's this concrete thing. We can look to it. Yeah, so that's just kind of my thought. There's plenty of other stuff in Exodus that I thought about talking about, like what's the deal with all the tabernacle furnishings and the Holy of Holies, and what's the deal with the gold and the bronze and the this and that. But I thought, no, I want to talk about something a bit more close to home, a bit more, real. All that other stuff is fascinating, but yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I just appreciate the insight. Yeah, that I do think. So I've been reading a few books. I'm actually breaking one of my rules on I try to read one book at a time, but right now I'm reading 2 books at the same time. Mm-hmm. But they're speaking with quite a consistent voice about the nature of ethics and how it is that we go about thinking about how we are to act, how we should act together in community as God's people. And a big part of it is saying it's not as easy as just figuring out what is the command and then do it. Now that is fundamental, and that is, most of the work, because sometimes we're not actually understanding. Not most of the work, a big part of the work. Because then the next part is how this actually plays out in your community and your heart attitude and within the framework of your context. So what might be loving in one context might not be loving in another context, right? My classic example of this is, like if you wanted to play tennis with someone, like maybe that's one way you want to hang out, but then maybe you have another friend who like broke their leg recently and you're like, let's play tennis. It's like, well, it's not the most loving thing to do right now because the other person can't play tennis with their broken leg. If you go, no, it's the same action. It was loving in that context. Why isn't it loving in this context? You're not understanding that what is loving might actually be affected by the situation you find yourself in. And I think that what you're pointing out here is a really helpful aspect of that in terms of context, which is recognizing that we have been saved. We are on a trajectory and a story, what God has done, which should instill in us a humility. Humility when it comes to relating with the sin of our brothers and sisters. humility when it comes to relating with others who have not yet come to Jesus, recognizing and remembering where we have come from. But we have such poor memories, right? Like I think when I've been forgiven by someone, or when I realize I've done something wrong, I can be very like kind and gentle and slow and quieter in the way I'm relating with them. But then give me like 2 months and I might go back to the same way of relating with them before. Because I've forgotten that, yes, I have done the wrong thing with this person before and I have been forgiven. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, nice. Cool.
All right, well, Pip, here are 2 themes from Seinfeld. It's time for you to try and guess where they come from. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Number 1.
I can't really hear that.
Oh, sorry.
I still can't really hear it.
Oh, no.
Play it louder or hold? Sorry, man. I can't, like, it's really weird through the...
You know what it is? I think it's because my Zoom is, you know how it, like, tries to filter outside sounds, like keyboard clicks and stuff like that? It's probably what's going on.
Maybe you should sing it.
No, I'm not going to do anymore. Okay, we'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's right. Do you want to do Guess Who?
Yeah, let's do that. Just say it, because our listeners, I think, will get it because of the recording here, but it was the Jerry Show theme. Remember end of season 4? How there's the Jerry Show, the TV show they're making?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
anyway,
good.
Let's play 20 questions, listeners. We're going to play 20 questions, Guess Who, Bible character. Pip's guessing this week. Are you playing along at home? Time to play. Pip, are you ready?
I'm ready. 20 questions?
20 questions, let's do it.
Okay, question number 1. Does this person's name appear in the New Testament?
Yes.
Does this person's name appear in the Old Testament?
No.
Okay. Is this person a male?
Yes.
Okay. Does this person appear in the Gospels? Ooh, ambiguous.
Ambiguous.
Okay.
4 questions.
Yeah. Does this person's name appear in Acts?
Yes.
Okay. Is this one of the apostles?
No.
Okay. Is this person a follower of Jesus?
As in a Christian. Is that what you mean? Yes. 7. By the way, this is hard mode. Just
Okay.
I'd say this is hard mode, I think. Yeah.
All right. Does this person talk with one of the apostles? Or does this person talk with one or more of the apostles?
Okay, can you clarify talk with? Are you saying as in they interacted with? Or are you saying that it's recorded that we see their dialogue?
It's recorded that we see their dialogue.
No.
Okay, does this person have an interaction with, like, not recorded, but it's implied that they have an interaction with the apostles?
Yes, that's 9. I think that's 9 questions.
Okay, all right. Does this person die at all in Acts?
No.
Recorded?
No.
Okay.
10 questions to go.
I was thinking maybe Eutychus. Because he died, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Okay, let me keep thinking. Is this person an Israelite?
I'm not sure. I think so, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
11.
Does this person appear in any of the letters of the New Testament?
Can you clarify appear? Do you mean like they're mentioned?
They're mentioned.
Yes.
Okay. Is this person mentioned in any Pauline epistles?
Yes.
Is this person mentioned outside the Pauline epistles? Is this person mentioned outside Acts and the Pauline epistles?
Let me check. I think so. Give me one moment. Yes! Yes. So, 14. 6 questions left.
Okay, I don't know if I'm going to get this, but okay, so is this person ever mentioned as a co-author or co-sender of a letter in the New Testament?
No.
Okay.
15.
Okay.
5 questions left.
All right. Does this person have any written speech in Acts? Did they say?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
4 questions left.
All right. I don't know if I'm going to get it. Is this person's conversion recorded in Acts?
No.
Okay.
17 questions. 3 left.
Does this person appear in multiple chapters in Acts?
I don't know. So I'm not going to... You know what? I'm going to give you a freebie. I'm not going to count that because
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if it's a yes or no.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Do you want a hint?
Sure.
What's the cheat question I did last week? Well, it wasn't a cheat question, but there was a question I gave last week that sort of made me narrow it down big time. About their name.
Oh, right. Did it start with a letter or something?
That wasn't the one I was thinking about, but all good.
Yeah, I can't remember that cheat question.
That's okay.
I'm gonna
It's
have to go out on a limb and probably guess.
Yes.
3
questions left.
Oh, okay. Let me just clarify this. This person was not one of the not one of the 12.
Yes.
No, so yes, it wasn't not one of the 12.
Yes, not one of the 12.
Okay.
2 questions left.
Does this okay? My last question will have to be guessing the name, I think. But this is okay. Does this person appear in the first 7 chapters of Acts?
No.
Okay.
One question left, Pip.
Okay.
All right, I'll give you a hint. All right, I'll actually give you the hint.
Okay.
Okay. One of the books of the Bible is named after him.
Oh.
That's what I meant by the one I asked last week. Like, is there a book of the Bible named after this person? Right, 1 question. You got to get it.
Yeah, but I did ask, did this person co-author? Did I say
You said this person listed as a co-author of a letter.
Okay. Oh, okay, but there's someone named... Oh, is it Titus?
No, unfortunately.
Who is it?
Mark.
Oh, Mark. Oh, interesting.
Good job, Pip. That was hard mode. So, as I understand it, I think Mark shows up in Acts 15 at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Acts 15 verse 37, Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them, but Paul did not think it wise to take him, because he had deserted them in Pamphylia, and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. And then Mark shows up again at the end of 2 Timothy chapter 4, where Paul says, bring Mark with you, for he is very useful to me. And then Peter writes at the end of 1 Peter chapter 5, he mentions Mark. And the question of whether or not Mark appears in the Gospels is ambiguous, because Do you know the reference I'm thinking about?
Oh, the naked guy? Or...
Yeah, the naked guy in
Yeah.
Mark chapter 14. There's a part where, verse 51, a young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. There's a theory that that's Mark.
Okay. There you go. That was a good one. And to be honest, can I just confess something?
Yeah, go.
If I had to tell you who all the Marks are in the New Testament, who all the Johns are in the New Testament, and even who all the Marys are in the New Testament, I would have a very difficult time.
There you go.
I mean, there are lots of Marks. You got Mark,
Yes.
you got John Mark. Is John
Well,
Mark or John?
I think John Mark is Mark, isn't he?
Is he John?
I thought the John Mark that was... I mean, I might be wrong about this. I thought the John Mark in the Acts passage is the Mark who goes on to write the Gospel of Mark.
I mean, is that John Mark or is that...
Yeah, I think so. I think it's John Mark.
Okay.
So I think there's one Mark.
Okay.
But there's many Johns. There's many Johns.
There's a lot of Johns going around.
That's right.
You know? And even Mary's. You got Mary, the mother of this person, Mary, the mother of that person, Mary Magdalene.
That's it.
Lots of Marys, lots of Johns. So anyway.
But good job, Pip. Good job.
Thank you.
You did
that was a good one. That was a good one.
Hey, Pip, I started learning Greek this week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Jack's been teaching me, so that is good. A good first session. So yeah. Any tips you'd like to give me, Pip, in learning Greek?
I am not the person to ask about like tips. I think that basically what people have told me has proved helpful, like holding a few things, juggling a few things. So vocab, learning, like you can learn the rules of a language without knowing the words of a language, and that's not much help. So starting to get into some vocab, very helpful. Keeping up your vocab. And I think maybe something that I'm starting to discover at the moment is it's much easier to stay motivated with language study when you just try to give it a go. Like whenever I play a board game, I'm the person who says, let's just play. Like we'll learn as we go. And so what's been helpful for me has been like picking up my Greek New Testament and just like starting at a random chapter in John and just trying to put together what I can. And when I get up to a word or when I get up to a sentence that's really like just I have got no idea what it says, then I'll start to Google it and look on like an interlinear version and say, okay, how does this work? And yeah, for me, I think keeping the big goal in mind, which is to read God's word in the language that it was originally given, so that I might understand something of the nuance of the word that I can't quite get in English. That's, knowing God better, knowing God's word better is the big goal. So, but in terms of actual, like how to learn things and how to kind of memorize things and all that, probably not the person to ask, and you're probably miles. I should probably ask you.
I'm one lesson in, my friend. I'm one lesson in.
Yeah. But even just like, I mean, I'm interested in, everyone's got a different learning style, and I think like over the last, ever since school started, I've still been trying to figure out what is my learning style. I think I like tables. I like putting things in an Excel spreadsheet and like being able to like play around with the data of what I'm learning and stuff like that.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't know, when from your I guess you probably did more subjects that required memorization of like facts, of like rules and kind of stuff like that. Because you did more of the kind of the STEM, the maths kind of side of stuff than I did. I was very much more English and history and legal studies and that kind of thing. What would your advice be to someone who's doing a subject that is probably closer to maths or a science than a humanities subject? Like what are some of the skills that you have to develop to get into that side of things?
I'm really looking forward to college next year because I'm looking forward to testing what I've reflected on over the last few years of not studying full time. Because I think I really confused myself. I'll tell you what I mean. During high school, I was told, James, you're an Asian. You need to get good at maths. You need to get good at science. I really, really struggled with the science side of things. Maths, I got, and the way in which I, was able to do that was through repetition, and just working at it, like just hard work. There were no shortcuts when it came to that. I just enjoyed working on it, developing patterns and that sort of thing. Science, I really struggled with because I think it's a whole lot of knowledge you get, but the way that science is taught, you can't really see the connections between all the different things, which is why when I was teaching chemistry and physics, when I would teach it, I loved going, can you see how this helps you understand more about what we saw 2 terms ago? And then seeing people go, oh yeah, like that connects it here. And because I started learning that when I was doing philosophy at uni. And that's what I loved about philosophy. I loved sort of mind mapping things or seeing how one concept connects with another and sort of visualizing it and then explaining it to other people. So I'm confused now about what my learning style is. So I'm really looking forward to college, to being able to study again. Most of all, to learn more about God and be equipped to serve his people. But also because I think I would like to see if some of these reflections that I've had on learning will translate into helping me be a better learner as well. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. You like tables and things you can work with, and I like that.
So
yeah.
I think I've I think the best way to learn something or to know that you've learned something is to try and teach it. And so I think so I've got like a spreadsheet for church history where anytime I come across a date or a name or an event, I'll put it down. So sometimes I'll put a name down, but I won't know the date. Or sometimes I'll put an event down and I won't know who or when was involved. But I'll just set myself like homework afterwards to try and track that down and try and fill in the missing pieces to try and, come up with a coherent account of, chronology of what's going on. But I think being able to kind of express it yourself in your own words and say, this is what happened, this is what it means is really helpful. What does that mean when you're learning a language? Like, what does it mean to put it in your own words or to explain it in your own words? I don't really know necessarily. I think what you said about just working hard and keep going, I think that's something I'm learning and is really helpful with languages, is like the power of osmosis, just being in it and just like doing it, every day for a bit of time. Yeah. That's the other thing. I mean, one of the reasons why I liked English and stuff like that in high school was you could cram it if you really wanted to.
Yes.
more time to watch Seinfeld.
Yes.
But you could never do that with like maths or physics, or you really kind of have to spend the time attaching each piece of knowledge to the last bit and building. So
yes. There's this analogy for that I don't remember if I first heard it from my friend or if I had come up with a version of it and now it's become like the one that my friend uses. But it's what subject is maths most like, And people go, physics or this or this or that. Well, it's actually most like a sport. If you think about, say, soccer or running or something. If you never run, and the day before you have a race, you go, okay, I'm going to spend 10 hours running. It's not going to help you. Would you say that's the same for Greek, for example? If you did no Greek and you tried to do 10 hours the day before.
Totally. I mean, that's a great analogy. I've never thought of it that way, but that's so true. And I mean, there are subjects even more at college you could probably cram. I mean, the subjects that are in English are so much easier than the subjects that aren't. It is definitely like that. And I think, I don't know, Yeah, I do sometimes think, I mean, I did pretty well in high school, but I do sometimes think whether, my, I don't know, like, I got decent grades, but like whether that was skewed by the fact that I was doing subjects that I really loved and was decent at.
That's
But
not a bad thing.
yeah, no, I know, but like I do think, having maths, I remember I used to sit in maths class and I used to think, what is the point of this? There, at least 50% of the people sitting around me are going to be way better at this than I am. And in the future, they can do it. I trust them. Whereas like, I don't know, I think like in say English or, there was room to come up with original ideas. Or it's like, mate, I could come up with an original idea that someone else might not come up with. And that's kind of fun and interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's why I
Nice.
liked that. But I think it is not doing a lot of those STEM subjects in high school has probably not set me up very well for like language learning. Doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means it's harder, I find, but still keen to do it. And the motivation, like I'm not sitting in class saying what's the point, because I know what the point is, and it's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've said already, like that is a strong motivation to know that this is immediately applicable. You know why this matters. You know how it will be helpful. That's a big motivation to keep at it.
Yeah. Listeners, if you have any tips for learning, if you have any insights that you'd like to share, feel free to email us at thebibleboys@gmail.com.
That's right. And listeners, that's going to do it for us for another week. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you have been amused. We hope that you have been entertained. We hope that you have been encouraged with the truth of God's word this week. So, signing out, this is James. See you later.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.